მოგესალმებით. დღეს ჩვენ ყავს უკვე ტრადიციულად ძალიან საინტერესო სტუმარი. ამჯერად წარმოგიდგენთ ინტერვიუს თანამედროვეობის ერთ-ერთ ყველაზე გამოცდილ ევროპელ პოლიტიკოსთან. იგი გახლდათ სხვადასხვა დროს პოლონეთის სეიმის თავმჯდომარე, პოლონეთის საგარეო საქმეთა და თავდაცვის მინისტრი, დღეს ის მოქმედი წევრია ევროპარლამენტის ბატონი Radoslaw Sikorsky, Radek Sikorsky, როგორც მას უწოდებენ და ჩვენ დღეს ვისაუბრებთ როგორც უსაფრთხოების პრობლემებზე და გამოწვევებზე ევროპაში, ასევე უკრაინაში მიმდინარე ომზე და რა თქმა უნდა საქართველოს ევროპერსპექტივებზე. Thank you, Mr. Sikorsky, for your time, and let me express my gratitude to your great country and to you personally for the unconditional support you always and in all circumstances render to Georgia. Let's start our conversation. I should say that you are an excellent debater. I watched your and Ambassador Makfol's debate with the stars of the realpolitik, and I was impressed. So, but now it's my turn to ask you. So, why President Biden and President Putin miscalculated the consequences of the Russian invasion in Ukraine back on February 24th?
Oh, I think President Biden got it exactly right. He had been warning both President Zelensky, who didn't quite believe him, and President Putin from October. That we know what you're doing, don't do it, or there will be serious consequences. And I think it's Putin that has miscalculated. He thought that Ukraine would not fight. He thought that he had a fifth column in Kiev. He thought that Western sanctions would be unserious. He thought he would win quickly, take over all of Ukraine, and restore the Russian Empire. All those Putin calculations have been wrong, whereas the United States has come through with its warnings and its assistance to Ukraine. So I think it's actually, terrible suffering, but actually the West's unity and effectiveness, I'm actually quite impressed by.
Recently, in your interview, you did not exclude the possibility to give Ukraine nuclear warheads. You said that Russia has violated the Budapest Memorandum, and therefore the West can give Ukraine the opportunity to defend its independence. The West has the right to give Ukraine nuclear warheads to protect its independence. In order to deter Putin from using them, he should know we have options too. In what circumstances can such a likelihood be raised?
I'm not saying we should do it, but I'm saying that Ukraine was cheated by Russia. Ukraine gave up nuclear warheads in return for being promised respect for its independence and its borders. And Russia has clearly cheated on that promise. We would be in our right to give Ukraine back the warhead.
I understand.
I don't think we are going to do it unless Russia used those weapons first. Russia keeps threatening to use them. It threatens the West, has threatened Poland, threatens Ukraine. If Russia broke the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, we would be in a new reality. And I'm glad that the Russian leadership has noticed that we are thinking about what to do in such an eventuality as well. And I noticed that they don't like the fact that this wouldn't necessarily be with impunity. Good.
Let's talk about realpolitik again. For me, there are only a few Western states, including Poland, Baltic states, the UK, and the US, that follow but perform realpolitik. I mean that they fully understand that Russia should not be allowed and have possibility to regain its strengths and start new wave of violent attacks on the West. What should be done to maintain Russia and defend future European security?
Well, the Russians have some kind of unhealthy atavistic obsession with gaining territory. I don't think it's just Putin. It seems to be more widespread. It seems to me to be a complete anachronism, particularly for the largest territorially country on earth already. You would think they have enough territory to invest in, and they should be investing in their own people to make themselves more respected and more prosperous. So this is some kind of sick obsession of theirs. But neighbors of Russia also have security interests, you know, the right to exist. Yeah. And we need to resist this this neo-imperialism. And that's why Poland has been spending 2% of GDP on defense for the last 15 years. We're now going to be spending 3%. And, you know, this was the reason we joined NATO, and I'm very glad we did.
Yeah. By the way, as we talk about Poland, like Germany that doubled its military expenses, is Poland going to raise its military budget or army?
As I've mentioned already, we have a super law that gives the army 2% of GDP. We will now be going to 3% of GDP. And this is a growing GDP, so we are going to become probably 15th army in the world. We've been 18th hitherto.
And what about numbers of military forces, amount of the military forces?
Well, it's not the numbers that you have on standby that count. It's your mobilization capacity. Yeah. So yes, you need a core of professionals, but you also need the general population trained somewhat and regularly updated and capable of being put on the front line at a moment's notice. Think Israel, think Finland, think Switzerland. Those should be our examples to follow. Also for Georgia, if I may say so.
How do you assess Boris Johnson's new initiative about the new union proposed to Ukraine? And what should Poland's position be in case this probability will turn into reality?
Well, Boris is an old friend, but you know, if Britain hadn't left the European Union, Britain could be helpful to Ukraine in becoming a candidate country and eventually a member. And I think that's what Ukraine wants above all. Whereas NATO membership is unlikely to happen because Germany has said it would veto it. But of course, if Britain wants to give Ukraine some kind of security guarantee, that would be a good thing, and I hope they would fulfill them better than the ones that they gave Poland in 1939.
How do you see the future European architecture, security architecture, and where is the place the countries like Georgia in it?
We have a very good architecture. It's just that we have a hooligan who is trying to bring down the building, and we need to resist the hooligan.
So you mean, of course, Putin and Russia and the Russian current government?
Yes. I mean, Georgia is a member of OSCE. If Russia would only follow the principles of OSCE, there would be no problem, would there? There's nothing wrong with the architecture. What's wrong is the behavior of one of the members of all these treaties, of the UN, of OSCE, of Council of Europe. Russia is in breach of all of them.
How long the West unity will last? What do you think?
Well, when resisting Nazi Germany, it lasted 5 years. It's up to Putin to decide. There's a very easy way of resolving this problem. Just go home and withdraw your troops beyond the international borders.
Let's talk about Georgian affairs. What are the chances of Georgia to get the EU candidate status?
Well, Georgia doesn't actually border on the EU, which is a problem, but you are very far advanced in association with the EU. Under the Eastern Partnership Program, which I devised with Carl Bildt, you have signed and implemented the deep and comprehensive free trade area. You now have visa-free access to the European Union. You're practically integrating into the European single market. I'm not sure how far you've implemented the association agreement, but that's the way to go. I think if Ukraine were to become a candidate status, that would be a good thing for you too.
But at the same time, we have never had such critical assessment of the Georgian government as we heard from your colleagues and the members of the European Parliament recently on June 8th. What is the #1 task for Georgia to fulfill, maybe not all, but the most part of the requirements of European Parliament resolution requirements?
I don't know that particular document and the most recent assessment, but don't worry, the current Polish government also has a very tough assessment. It is on the penalties, actually, from the European Court of Justice for breaking rule of law. So don't follow the current Polish government, follow the best practice in the European Union. And if your government has broken some of the procedures or values, then persuade it to stop doing it, because there's no going around being in compliance with the criteria of membership.
And some questions about Ukraine again. How realistic do you see that Ukraine may win back its territories, I mean Donetsk and Luhansk, or is there any alternative?
Well, it's not going to be easy to push the Russians out because the Ukrainians are outgunned at the moment, and which of course means that it will be even more difficult to carry out a counteroffensive. But you know, my professor at Oxford used to say, where there is death, there is hope. Putin will not be the leader of Russia forever.
And how long, what do you think, how long his leadership will last?
Well, he's not going to lose a democratic election for president, that's for sure. We don't know who will win an election, but we know who will count the votes. But I hope that the people of Russia see the madness of his policies, and that there will be some patriotic Russians who will terminate his presidency with extreme prejudice.
Is there any chances for Georgia and NATO after Ukrainian war comes to an end to become the members of NATO?
I wouldn't hang all my hopes on this if I were you, because there are countries in NATO that are skeptical. Remember, membership in NATO means that we would be willing to go to war with Russia in your defense. And there is no appetite for that in Europe. And I'm afraid that will affect your chances.
But then what will be your advice to the Georgian government?
My advice is to modernize your country as if the problems with Russia didn't exist. That's the best way to make yourself attractive to the Ossetians, the Abkhazians, or other Georgian people, and to create the kind of resilient civil defense and defense system like other smaller countries that face bigger neighbors, so that the Russians in future decide that a repeat invasion wouldn't be worth it.
What are the necessary steps to maintain a sustainable economy and the defense and defense capabilities, and strengthen our defense capabilities?
Just implement the association agreement and the deep and comprehensive free trade area. You know, it's a set of rules that have made European countries what they are today, which is to say rich democracies. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, just repeat what they have done and you'll be fine.
And the final question, what will be your advice? How we deal with Russian influence, the growing Russian influence? What will be necessary steps? What will be necessary steps how to deal with Russian influence, the growing Russian influence in Georgia?
Well, the best way is to fight corruption, because the Russians gain a lot of influence through corruption. And also you need a well-educated public that can tell truth from lies. And of course you also need laws to restrict the operation of Russian active measures and Russian disinformation. You know, Russians should not have more freedom to operate in our countries than they give us to operate in their country. Reciprocity is the word.
Thank you very much. Thank you again for your time and for the very interesting interview. And I hope that we will have more chances to do interviews with you and see you in Georgia.